My name is Peig Myota. I'm doing this for the videotaping, so they know who I am. And my presentation tonight is the living language of light. I'm actually going to be presenting a condensed version of a seminar that I give once in a while. And I'm going to talk about the purpose for the living language of light, its energetic structure, the forms it takes, and how to access it. And the work that I do in my office with clients includes integrating thought intention, the frequency of love, light therapy, with soul-centered mentoring to assist them in their process of healing and awakening. And I am in the process of writing a book. It's called The Power of Love and Awakened Consciousness, and it describes the work that I've done over the last 20 years or so, and I'm on chapter 5 of 10.
Yeah, very
So
good. That's
posted.
exciting.
The purpose for the living language of light is to guide us in our process of healing and awakening, and also to connect us with the divine intelligence for that process, and to help us understand there is indeed an innate intelligence that speaks to us constantly, and we can choose to enter into a dialogue with that communication anytime. That's a gift that we all receive from the Creator, and the more awakened we are, the more easily it is to do that. Living light helps to expand our consciousness and give us a direct personal experience with divine intelligence and knowledge. I'm going to define it a little bit for you. The language of light is really a living consciousness that incorporates the frequency of love as well as light. And it creates an acceleration in our individual consciousness and also helps to evolve the plan for all of humanity. It consists of compressed modules of coded light that are infused within our human consciousness and into the actual cellular DNA of our body. It incorporates a sacred symbolic language in the form of energy consciousness, and it assists our body to energetically transform by rewiring or reprogramming our cellular DNA. It assists us to integrate spiritual light codes within our cellular DNA in our process of healing and awakening. Light language is light energy consciousness, and consciousness is light energy information. It takes a number of different forms, and I know all of you have experienced some of them. Sound, color, light. Most of us are aware of crop circles. That's sacred geometry, sacred language. Our thoughts, our insights, our creative ideas, our intuition. We receive this information in visions, through meditation, dream images, sacred artwork, sacred music, spiritual and cellular light codes, and sacred mantras, words, and prayers. And I'm going to talk about that a little bit more tonight. We can access the living language of light through toning, through singing, listening to sacred music, praying, meditating, reflecting, through movements like Tai Chi, yoga, Qigong, sacred dancing like Sufi dancing and Native American sun dancing. We can access it through mudras, mantras, and yantras. And we can also access it through light therapy, color, sound, and frequency therapy. It can be accessed through sun viewing, Buddhist sand drawings, sacred art, especially galactic glyph artwork, and I'll show you an example of that tonight. And sacred sounds like kirtan, singing bowls, drumming. We can access it through nature sounds, and we can activate our DNA light codes using specific thoughts and intentions. And I'll talk about that a little tonight also. We can access it through daily spiritual practice with the intention to communicate with the consciousness of living light, and by attuning our bodies to a higher frequency with proper nutrition, exercise, movement, to become more receptive to the higher frequency of the language of light. It's important to take increased time in solitude so that we can keep our energy balanced, and also to protect us from the lower frequencies in the outer world that we are all exposed to the minute we walk out of our house every day. The function of the living language of light is literally to sustain all life on this planet and to accelerate the evolution of human consciousness. In the plant kingdom, we call the process photosynthesis. In the human kingdom, it's called biophotonic synthesis, but we're very similar to plants in how we take in the energy of light in order to stay alive. Human life was designed to ingest plant-based food and to progress on living on light alone eventually, to complete the process of permanently infusing our higher consciousness or body of light energy into our physical body. Enlightened consciousness or complete awakening requires the ability to primarily live on light in order to sustain the energy needed to hold the higher frequency of our body of light. High frequency within our dense physical form. There are about 40,000 people in the world today who are living on light alone, and I'm sure you are all aware of a growing movement, I'll call it, for people to kind of naturally transition to vegetarian eating, as well as what I like to call plant-based living. It's part of the evolution of humanity, and there are always several thousand people that are kind of at the forefront of that. And all of you in this room are part of that group. And we'll talk about that more tonight also. So the function for the language of light is to sustain and evolve humanity through a process of biophotonic synthesis, similar to photosynthesis in the plant kingdom. The ultimate purpose is to assist humans to naturally live on light, to sustain our higher self-consciousness within our physical body, and that is a definition for enlightened consciousness. Any questions?
That sounds exciting.
Pardon?
That sounds exciting.
It is exciting. It's taken us several 100,000 years to evolve to this ability, so that's very exciting. So I'm going to talk a little bit from a historical perspective now, in terms of how our ancient ancestors accessed this language of light compared to how we are able to do it now in our modern times. As you know, the human brain has evolved over these thousands of years as we have evolved our consciousness. Our Stone Age ancestors, 100,000 years ago, had a brain that was very large, but it was not segmented into left and right hemispheres. However, our Neanderthal and Cro-Magnon ancestors were not as primitive as we originally thought. They had a very highly evolved brain with the ability to communicate with cosmic consciousness and to live in harmony with nature and the universe. The symbolic drawings that are found as wall drawings in caves depict the ability that they have to communicate and work with the unity of light by the symbols that they drew on those cave walls. The world is much older than scientists are expressing, and the wonderful ancient wisdom teachings of the Theosophical Society, as well as Bob's book, clearly define that. Our humanity and our Earth is millions of years old, not just thousands. Our ancient Lemurian culture represented a time period when the brain of humanity did begin to bifurcate or divide into a left and a right hemisphere. And it's oftentimes talked about symbolically as the fall from grace, when we separated from Creator consciousness. It's the story of Adam and Eve. It's when humans began to become individuated with our human consciousness, and therefore more separate from the unity Creator consciousness that we are created with. But humanity needed to experience that separateness of self-consciousness in order to understand duality, separation, and to find our way back to that unity that we were all created with. And that to learn how to integrate, literally, the higher spiritual light codes within our physical bodies. So that process was part of the divine plan, and it has taken a long time for us through the experience of a process of healing and awakening to become unified again, is a good way to say it. So as humans, we needed to learn that the power box for transformation is within us, and we needed to figure out how to turn that power on, and how to work with that coded light energy that were signals designed as a two-way transmitter communication system. Hi, come by in. It's good to see you. So some of the sources today refer to our current North America as the new Atlantis, having a second chance to do it right. And there are many things that we're experiencing in our culture that were quite similar to how the culture of Atlantis destroyed itself as power and competition and materialism began to take over the purity of spiritual existence. So one of the things that evolved us after the age of the cavemen, so to speak, were the 5 sacred languages that the earth was given to assist us to communicate with the language of light. The Sanskrit Indian language, the Chinese language, the Tibetan Buddhist language, the Egyptian language, and the Hebrew Aramaic language. And each of these 5 sacred languages incorporated specific mantras or prayers or words of power to assist us to do that. And I'll give you a couple of examples. In Sanskrit, some of you are familiar with Om Namah Shivaya. It's a powerful healing mantra, and it's the most holy salutation to the Lord Shiva. And it means I offer to Shiva a respectful invocation of his name. The well-known Buddhist mantra, Om Mani Padme Hum, contains all of the teachings of the Buddha, and it is believed that if it is spoken 100 million times in a single lifetime, it is said that one can become enlightened. I don't know, I've been working on it. In Chinese, an example of a sacred mantra is Shan Shan Zhou Lu Ba Wa Yu, and that is to heal or to gain youthfulness. An Egyptian mantra is a simple one. It's simply Isis, but it's pronounced Isis. And saying that repeatedly is a way to help to open the third eye, develop clairvoyance. And it is very powerful when said at sunrise or with the full moon. The Hebrew or Aramaic words of power or prayers, of course the Lord's Prayer was given in Aramaic. And there's another prayer called the Miracle Prayer, and some of you may have heard of that. Another example of the Hebrew language is the 72 names of God in symbolic form. You can access all of this information on the internet and certainly in a number of books. And with the Miracle Prayer, it is said that if one learns to pronounce it in the ancient Aramaic language, that miracles happen in our life. And I'm going to say it for you so that you can hear what ancient Aramaic sounds like, and to have a sense of this has not been translated to English. So I'll just say it for you, just listen. Anabakor Gejalate Mika Tata Tizero Kabel Renat Asham Seknon Venue to Harana Nora Nagabor Doshikate Kava Vachram Bakam Tamlam Rakame Tizikate Tamlan Gaman Chazin Kadosh Roftuka Nahel Adakate Yohikahe Lamsha Penny Zokre Gadushate Ataka Sharadvoto Nu Kabel Ushma Zakate Niyota Alamota Baruch Hashem Kavote Malkuta Olam Vod. And on the internet you can purchase CDs that will help you learn how to pronounce that. And I listened to those CDs over and over and over for a number of weeks, and there are many, many stories about people who have used and said that miracle prayer, in how miracles have happened in their life. Any questions? Okay, so now we're going to go on to our more modern ways that we are accessing, and some of the teachers that have helped us to access this language of light. How many of you are familiar with the teachings of Greg Braden? I know some of you are. He is a scientist. I call him a spiritual scientist, a computer whiz. And he did computer research to demonstrate how the living language of light is found within the structure of the body by comparing the numerical frequency of the ancient languages of Hebrew, Sanskrit, and Aramaic with the numerical frequencies of the elements of all life which are contained in our body: carbon, oxygen, hydrogen, and nitrogen. It's a fascinating book to read, and he's actually a very good writer, and even though he does phenomenal scientific work, he can write it in a very understandable way. How many of you are familiar with Drunvalo Melchizedek's work related to sacred geometry and how that represents the living language of light, and also the energetic structure for our Merkaba, which is another name for our body of light or higher consciousness. Also the teachings of Richard Rudd, who is a phenomenal researcher and has defined how the 64 spiritual DNA light codes, which he calls gene keys or qualities of consciousness, can be integrated within our human consciousness to activate our 12 strands of junk DNA.
Junk?
And his work is a little less well known, it's a little harder to find, but if you Google Richard Rudd, you will find it. Another teacher of mine, Simeon Nartumit, who lives in the United Kingdom, does teachings and trainings related to soul readings, which I do for clients, to understand how our soul consciousness energy pattern integrates divine light codes within our human consciousness. And it's fascinating work to do, and it's remarkable how these modern teachers are giving us different ways to access this. So with modern communication, as human consciousness has evolved, we are now able to directly access this coded living light language. It requires some training to learn how to integrate our human and higher consciousness with cosmic solar consciousness. It takes an understanding of what the mechanism is for how the 64 spiritual DNA light codes integrate with our 64 physical protein DNA codes, but the information is all there. Takes an awareness of how we receive this light language through DNA codes from incoming accelerated light energy that's being infused within the physical body. Many people today are experiencing images of coded light symbols in their dreams, in their meditations. A lot of my clients do during light therapy, during sun viewing. And it takes an openness to wanting to access living light information to assist us in our process of healing and awakening. We can train ourselves to access and decode the individualized information that is transmuted from higher consciousness to our human consciousness. And we all have an individualized light energy system, and we are all given individualized symbols that are easier for us to understand compared to someone else. So I have students, some of them may receive the vision of the Buddha if they are studying Buddhism or they are involved in that philosophy. I've had students that have visualized the face of Christ or Christ's hands. And those symbols are all specific for them, but they all represent the same thing, and that's the coded living language of light. The more we expand our consciousness, the more direct access we have to that living language of light and the ability to become more proficient in decoding it. Because of the incoming accelerated energy that we are experiencing on this planet, we are seeing a lot of chaos in the world. We are seeing a crisis in mental health. We are seeing a crisis in the numbers of suicides and murders. And this is all related to this accelerated incoming energy. Way back when we were part of the caveman generation, and many of you had lifetimes in Lemuria as well as Atlantis, the human brain had a protective filter that was located in the base of our brain. And since we have evolved in consciousness, this filter, which we oftentimes call a protective veil, is disintegrating. Okay? And so what's happening is a lot of people are having rapid breakthroughs. I'll put it that way. We have words for them: near-death experiences, out-of-body experiences, communicating with loved ones in the spiritual world, incredible visions and knowings that you can experience walking in a park, driving your car. And the reason I mention this is because these breakthrough experiences are very close to breakdown experiences if we are not balanced and able to control our thoughts and emotions. Okay? And they can also be very frightening for people who don't have the background that all of you do. There's more and more information being written about this, and in my experience in working in the field of counseling, mental health, and psychology for the past 40 years, we are just tapping the surface of how to really treat what we call mental illness, and many of these breakthroughs are being labeled as things like schizophrenia, bipolar disorder, and so the treatment is not just to put people on medication, it's to teach them what's happening in terms of their breaking through with their human consciousness to a higher aspect of their soul consciousness. And it's frightening for people because they oftentimes talk about perceiving dark beings, hearing voices, having obsessive thoughts, being controlled by these voices. And the reality of all of this is they are breaking through to their own thousands of lifetime soul consciousness personalities. Okay, and we've all had many lifetimes where we've been not so nice ourselves, dark beings, to learn what it's like to not only know there is a reality of evil or a dark side, whatever you want to call it, so that we eventually learn over thousands of lifetimes to work with and choose the light. So again, those rapid breakthrough experiences really can be very frightening, and they can feel like we are having a nervous breakdown. I'll use those colloquial terms, but that's exactly what it feels like. So rapid expansions of consciousness also enhance our psychic abilities, our sensitivities to others. It's called empathic sensitivity, and there are multiple cases of people especially who have near-death experiences, out-of-body experiences, who communicate directly with the living language of light, and after that their lives change in terms of how they see the world, how they understand themselves, and many of them report having enhanced psychic abilities, and many of those folks go on into the healing arts to help others to understand and learn what they experienced. Does that make sense? Good. So as we take in the higher frequencies of living light, we also become more sensitive to energetic changes on this planet. I have a number of people that I've worked with who have the ability to feel natural disasters before they happen, and empathically can feel the pain and suffering that many people are going to go through as a result of them. You've seen what has happened recently in Guatemala with the volcano, in Hawaii with the volcano. And when people don't understand that they have the psychic ability and the advanced intuition to do this, it can be very frightening to see those things in images or dreams, and then when they come true, a lot of people feel they've caused them, and it isn't that at all. It's just that they have the sensitivity to feel that energy before it happens. So I'm going to discuss some of the, I'll call them symptoms, that go along with our expanded consciousness, especially at this time of accelerating consciousness, because I've done a lot of work in this area, and I want to let you know that if you're experiencing any of these things, you are not imagining them. Because I talked to you about these living energies that integrate with the energies of our physical body and cellular DNA. Some of the symptoms are physical. You can experience fatigue, exhaustion, muscle aches, pains, mood swings, hot flashes, headaches, and I can tell you that almost all of my advanced students can give you a nice list of how they have experienced these things from time to time. Sleep and digestive disorders, anxiety, a feeling of nervousness, very high energy within your body, feeling ungrounded, heart palpitations, deep feelings of sadness, crying without understanding why, vision changes, skin issues, rashes, breaking out in different kinds of bacterial rashes. You have to remember your body is physically transforming with all of this. Ringing in the ears, dizziness. I've worked with 3 people in the last month or so that have had severe cases of dizziness, and part of that was due to the fact that they were not grounding themselves and they were doing too much in the outer world without balancing that with their inner work. Heightened sensitivity to emotions, problems of others, and difficulty being in large crowds or out in the public. Have any of you experienced any of this? Yeah. So I'm telling you, you're not imagining them, and you're in good company. This is part of the process of expanding consciousness, and it's very real. And the more we talk about it, the more we are able to share that information and actually record it. Let's see, I'm going to talk a little bit more about... So, the challenge of accelerated incoming light energy takes courage and a little bit of training and an effort to keep yourself balanced and grounded. The incoming light energies do help us in our process of literally molecular reconstruction, and they will continue to increase over the next 150 years. It's all part of the Theosophical ancient wisdom teachings. It's part of the divine plan. It can feel like riding a roller coaster sometimes between your human and higher consciousness. Resisting the process is impossible. Riding the roller coaster involves working with understanding that we are all going to experience challenging life experiences because that's part of the process of healing and awakening. So I'm going to briefly define a few simple things that you can do to help you stay balanced and grounded. One of them is to maintain a healthy physical body. Work with your emotions in a healthy way. Work with your mind in a healthy way. Keep your thoughts positive. Stop negative feelings and shift them to positive. A daily spiritual practice, including prayer, reflection, walking in nature, inspirational reading, they all count. And living from your heart center, which is about love, acceptance, and forgiveness for yourself and others. Remember, I told you that this incoming living light language incorporates the frequency of both love and light. And part of what we need to learn as our consciousness expands is we need to demonstrate the energy of love, don't we? And right now that's lacking to a large extent in our world, isn't it? So those are sound like simple things that we can do on a regular basis, but not so simple. It takes time, it takes effort, and it takes a conscious awareness that while you are doing those things, you are taking responsibility to work with your process of healing and awakening. So I'm going to talk a little bit more. You have a question?
I'm sorry, I'm just...
That's okay. That's fine. I know I'm giving you a lot of information, but you can all handle it. You're doing well. So in working with the living language of light, I want you to understand that you were designed as a sender and a receiver of the living language of light. You're kind of like a radio transmitter or a computer crystal. And when we look at as technology has grown over the years, there's a lot of similarity in the crystals that are used within technology like computers and the crystalline design within the energy frequency of our bodies. And just like we can communicate directly with a divine light intelligence, computers also are an intelligence of their own. Have any of you had the experience of working with a computer as intelligence in, for instance, maybe Googling something you wanted to learn about and you find that what comes up is exactly what you needed? Mm-hmm. I've also had the experience of knowing that when that happens, copy it right away, because sometimes it'll never come up again. And that makes me crazy, because when I want to go back and check that source, all of a sudden it's not there, and then I realize that I'm communicating with the intelligence of the computer, and that's why it happened. So our spiritual DNA light codes connect us directly to the original blueprint for all of life. In more modern writing, it's often called divine matrix, the morphic field, the energy grid, fiber optic grid. These are all, again, more modern ways of describing what the ancient Vedic teachings described thousands of years ago as Indra's net. And if you want to do some interesting research, go back and Google Indra's net and you'll find it very interesting. So to become fully awakened in human form, we need to be able to sustain the physical energy in order to communicate with the high frequency living light energy, so that we can permanently infuse that energy within our physical body. The coded spiritual and human DNA light language is powered by the frequency of love, and it is the energetic source that sustains all life. The building block of all material existence is known as a number of different words. The God particle in the field of science, the adamantine particle in the teachings of Christ, and generally known as the frequency of love. Until we can identify with and demonstrate and learn to command the power of love, we cannot communicate directly with the divine source of creation. The accelerated incoming language of light is upgrading our human DNA design codes so that we can more easily merge into the energy field or matrix or morphic field, whatever you want to call it, of creator consciousness. Our cellular DNA is being transformed, and we are experiencing within our body a molecular transformation. It's part of the process. And it's also a gift that has been given to humanity. The gift is that we can indeed become enlightened while we're in physical form. And many ancient spiritual teachers and sages have demonstrated it for us, haven't they? Yeah. So you're in good company, and we're all next in line to do what our world spiritual teachers have been teaching us for a long, long time. So I'm going to talk a little bit more about tools that you can use to access and work with the living language of light that have been given specifically to humanity for this purpose. I'm going to share some of those with you. Are any of you familiar with the Kadosh mantra or the Kadosh word of power? It's a Hebrew mantra, and I'll say it for you. Kadosh, 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 Adonai Tsebeach. And the definition is holy, holy, holy is the Lord God of hosts. The whole earth is full of his glory. We've heard this in many of our modern and Christian religious teachings. The ancient Hebrew word of power was given to humanity from divine beings of light. The person saying this mantra is able to directly absorb the light energy from the masters of light, who use this code to connect to the consciousness mind of the Creator. The spoken word of power is the key to assist humanity integrate spiritual and physical DNA codes in order to infuse our physical body with the consciousness of our body of light, Christ oversoul, higher self, there's many different words for it, Merkaba. This code allows the physical body to directly receive the frequency of divine love. It can also be used as a powerful mantra to protect ourselves and our loved ones by saying it. And I say this mantra every single night. With the power of love, I surround myself and my loved ones and family with white light to protect them from all powers not identified with the light of the Creator. Very simple, and it holds the frequency of the power of the living language of light, and it's been used for hundreds of years. Specifically through the Jewish tradition, but that has now integrated across the world. Another powerful tool that I know most of you are familiar with is the Great Invocation. Are any of you not familiar with the Great Invocation? Okay. That also is not just a prayer. It's a word of power that was given to humanity after World War II when we were about to blow ourselves to smithereens. And it is only at times like that that the higher council of spiritual masters who are guiding us ask for permission can ask for permission from the higher councils to stop us from destroying ourselves. In ancient art as well as modern, we can work with what are called galactic glyphs, and I will pass this around for you to look at it. This is a very ancient galactic glyph. It's also known as a yantra. And when I talked about yantras, they're most known in the Eastern Vedic tradition, but the best way to work with them is to actually draw them, okay? And the way to receive the best and the greatest energy from them is similar to the Buddhist sand drawings. Once you start, you go into deep meditation and you do not stop until the whole thing is replicated, okay? And I've done some of this work with Vedic yantras, simple ones, that I knew I could finish within at least an hour or two. So I'll pass this around, and the other thing I want you to look at on the other side a little bit more closely is this the symbol for the 72 names of God. And if you Google galactic glyph, you will find there are a number of extremely evolved artists in the world today that are drawing these glyphs and have direct access to communicate with this living language of light. And you can find that if you just sit and look at them. It's a wonderful meditation tool, but they are being given specific symbols in an art form that assist us, again, access that living language of light. I think that's all I want to say about that. Any questions? I'm giving you as many examples as I can, and I know that some of you have had access to these and have studied them over the years. So this whole process of accessing the living language of light is similar to being like a fine-tuned violin, okay? The more we stay in tune and sustain our physical energy frequencies at the highest level, which is needed in our process of healing and awakening, the more we can access this language of light. If we become out of tune by engaging too much in outer world energy dramas, I'll use those words, it can drain the physical energy that we need to access this light. And if we don't stay in balance with our inner work and outer work in the world, we pay the price physically, emotionally, intellectually, and spiritually. And working with the power of love on a daily basis requires that we respond to all life circumstances with absolute unconditional love. And I don't know about you, but I'm still working on that. And it is a bit of a challenge. So those of us, this is serious work, those of us who do not stay in tune and have the potential, okay, to not only access this light for yourself, but all of humanity, will not survive this stage of accelerated human consciousness. And you are seeing that across the world by some of the aberrant behavior that is occurring. Some of it due to, I'll just politely use the word, incompetent political leaders across the world. I'm not being...
Not naming names.
So we do need people with expanded, evolving consciousness with leadership abilities to be into positions of leading others. Does that make sense? Mm-hmm. Yeah. And you are all some of these people. We are not all going to be a president or a head of a corporation, but no matter what your chosen field of work is, you can energetically influence others by your behavior and by your energy frequency alone. And I know many of you have experienced this, and I get that feedback all the time from my advanced students, that someone will be say to them, you look different. Did you change your hair? I really like the color of your shirt. Or a perfect stranger will walk up to them just to say hello. So you will attract others as you increase your energy frequency. You're not imagining that. It's part of the process. And it actually is a wonderful way to confirm for yourself that you're doing your work well. and you are influencing others, and that's what it's all about. Any questions at this point? Okay. So I'm going to talk a little bit now about a little bit of a review to make sure that you understand that the goal for working with the living language of light is literally to integrate higher consciousness within our own physical body. And that consciousness is stepped down from the highest frequencies of creator consciousness, cosmic solar consciousness, and then it individuates into our own higher self-consciousness, our soul consciousness, and then eventually our human consciousness, and into our physical bodies. So it really takes effort to sustain the energy frequency to hold that higher frequency of consciousness. There are 4 keys to work consciously with the living language of light, and they may sound simple, but they are not. The first one is to experience your identity as a being of pure love. You were all created by the source of love, with the frequency of love. How many of you have had an actual personal experience of being divine love and being united or integrated with all life? Any of you?
To such a small degree, it was such a weak, it's a weak sensation of that probably.
Yeah. And a lot of times it's a kind of a brief glimpse, and we're always happy if it's repeated in any way, and that's what I'm talking about in terms of a breakthrough. When you actually experience your connection with the frequency of love, with the frequency of the Creator, with the source of love. And that's more important than reading a million books, okay? Studying across all traditions. The process of healing and awakening is experiential. Okay, you can't just read about it. You have to experience it, and that makes it quite difficult, because sometimes when you do experience it, first of all, it's hard to explain to anybody, and it's sometimes hard for us to realize ourselves that what we just had was an experience of communicating with higher consciousness, with the living language of light. The second is the ability to understand and visualize the energy pathway for how the living language of light infuses the human body. And I can't go into that tonight, because that's a whole hour all by itself. But there is a specific pathway that light comes down from the Creator into cosmic solar light, and then down into spiritual DNA light codes, of which there are 64, and those are the ones that integrate with the 64 protein codes within our physical body. And all of this has now been scientifically confirmed, and so a lot of the information that I have received in meditations and visions and so forth, I am thrilled to see others writing about it, because it makes me understand that I was receiving higher knowledge, put it that way. And I know all of you have had those experiences too. The third is the ability to decode the individualized information that's received from the living language of light. It will come to each of you, and I'm sure you've experienced it in different visions and different symbols. It could be sacred geometry. It could be seeing a triangle. It could be seeing the flower of life. All of these are symbols of the living language of light. And when that happens to you, it's confirmation that your efforts are paying off and you are within a two-way, thank you, communication with that living language of light. The fourth is the ability to sustain the energy frequency needed to communicate with that living language. And I'm going to mention a few things that really help that process. I briefly mentioned vegetarian eating or plant-based nutrition. When you think about the process, the photosynthesis process that plants go through, and the photobionic process that we are going through, it just like kind of is common sense. Wouldn't you eat the highest frequency food that you could find instead of heavy, dense junk food that has no nutrition in it and literally pulls your energy frequency down? And one of the worst things is alcohol, drugs. And you know, I've done a lot of research over the years about experiences, meditative experiences that people have had with LSD and DMT and a lot of the shamanic herbs and so forth. And my view is you don't need all of those things. You have the ability within you to naturally connect and communicate with that higher consciousness. And my experience is oftentimes, and you've read about them as well as I have, that sometimes people can have breakdowns when they break through too quickly, especially if you are using a very harsh drug that the body can't handle. I guess that's the best way to say it. This process was meant to occur over time, gradually, and I have mentioned many natural ways for you to access this light and to use as tools. The other thing that helps is regular fasting. And if you go back and you think about all of our spiritual teachers, world teachers, whether it's Christ or the Buddha or Krishna, they all fasted for up to 40 days, and they taught their disciples and students to periodically fast. And you are also now beginning to see that in the medical literature, especially for people with cancer and serious diseases, because fasting actually helps to shift our DNA expression. So through healthy eating and nutrition and fasting, we can shift negative DNA expression to positive. And that is also well researched. So think if you did that when you're healthy and you don't have an illness, what that's doing to assist the transformation of your cellular DNA. The other thing I will mention when I talked about protection from the outer world is protection from man-made high electromagnetic frequencies and unhealthy light sources. So pay attention to the work environment that you live in. Pay attention to the kind of light bulb you have in your home. And all of those things are something that you can do something about. And then, of course, the most important that I shared with you is to demonstrate absolute unconditional love, despite the challenges that you are given from those closest to you, to learn the process of forgiveness, compassion, and unconditional love, right? Yeah. So without doing the work needed to raise our physical energy frequency, the process of working with the living language of light is going to be more physically and emotionally painful because the energy is coming in. We are designed, our little antennas are hooked up, okay? And the higher we keep our frequency, the more likely it is that we're going to form a two-way communication. So we need to embrace the pain and work with it and be grateful for the privilege of learning to clear negative emotions and negative thoughts from the cell memory of our bodies. And this is what we contracted for. When humanity separated from creator consciousness to learn first how to become self-conscious and then to be conscious and evolve the consciousness as collective humanity, this is the divine plan and we are all living it today. And we don't really have a choice. It can happen more quickly for some people who work with it, but it will happen for everyone eventually. And you have a choice of doing it over thousands and thousands and thousands of lifetimes, or paying attention to the potential we have with this accelerated energy to work with it and make this lifetime work and make it really count. Any questions? So I brought a few handouts with me that list those requirements for advanced healing and transformation, and I'll pass them around. I think I have about 10 copies. So maybe those of you who are here and see each other regularly, can share a copy.
Just need one copy for the society. I can make copies from that.
Okay, so I'll just pass these around. It's a nice little reminder. Put them somewhere. And it's a nice reminder that we can indeed consciously work with this process. And if we make an effort to just hold those requirements in our awareness as we live with life every day, it can help to integrate that into our human and our waking consciousness. So any questions or comments at this point?
I just wanted to share that I just heard recently on Wisconsin Public Radio, which I listen to all the time, that scientists now have determined that plants can actually communicate. There is a consciousness between plants, and that they can help one another. Trees, they've actually been able to see this, or they're able to prove it, I guess you could say, scientifically, that trees are able to, through the root system and through the various insects and whatnot that are part of that, embedded in the roots and whatnot, that they're actually able to warn one another of the dangers that are coming, or that if they're suffering a disease, that they are able actually to help them and send healing to one another. It was fascinating, but anyway, I thought about you at that time because of this whole thing about,
Doesn't that make sense, though?
But the fact that the scientists are actually able now to track this, it's amazing to me. It's wonderful.
Well, that's the wonderful part of technology, because ever since we got into quantum mechanics and quantum physics and we started to understand we could measure these frequencies, now we're beginning to see everything is energy. Everything has energy frequencies, and I just described for you that the living language of light is light, energy, information. We know we're all connected by a collective consciousness as humans. Why wouldn't that be true for animals?
Yeah, for all life. All life is one.
And there have been many experiences about, we call people who communicate with the plants, we say they have a green thumb, but they love them. They're taking care of them. They can talk with them. And there are some people that say, I can't raise a cactus. But then that's because you're feeling separate from it, isn't it? Yeah, it makes perfect sense to me.
Yeah,
That makes
that's good.
perfect sense. Yeah. So with that information, I'm going to close tonight. And